some kids on the playground after school who were like 9 or 10 years of age had started to get into a shoving match that turned into a fight between kids. And the parents went to their cars and got various implements to use as weapons and started beating kids and each other with like shovels and snow and ice removal tools and stuff like that.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with attorneys at the top of their game to help you navigate the ins and outs of various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Debra Whitson, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears her name out in New York. How are you doing today, Debra?
Hey, Justin, I'm great today. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Well, as always, we're going to start just by jumping over and taking a look at her website. This is whitsonlawfirm.com. That's whitsonlawfirm.com. We will have a link in the description and the show notes to that. And Deborah is you can also reach her online, I guess, or on phone, which is 518-412-4111. And she also authored a book that we're going to talk about in a little bit, which is called Divorce Like a Pro, A Better Way to Break Up, which you can actually download for free on her website, or you can purchase on Amazon, which you can see right here. 5-star rating with 11 reviews. Clearly, it is a good book. I think you can pay for it on Amazon, or you can get it for free at her website. So if you want to be able to read that and get the insights, we're going to talk about what's in that book later. That's exactly what you can do by going to her website and downloading coffee. I need to download some coffee. My goodness, and downloading a copy. Before we dive in, we're going to jump over and read from one of our sponsors. Our first sponsor today is National ERC. You obviously may have noticed that the world went through a pandemic a couple of years ago, and many businesses were forced to shut down, had reduced hours, had supply chain issues, interruptions, and ultimately they suffered from reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. What you may not know is that Congress passed the CARES Act, which did allocate $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never needs to be paid back. This is not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. It is free money for your business if you had W-2 employees that could be spent in whatever way you think makes the most sense. It's functionally a retroactive tax credit that never needs to be paid back. It has less than a year left. So if you are interested, now is the time to act. You can go to nationalerc.org and use their calculator to see how much money you may be entitled to. And again, this is free money that never needs to be paid back. The average small business that they work with gets back over $200,000 to invest in their company. They've helped people recover over $1.3 billion in funds. The calculator itself is completely free, and there is never any charge unless they are successful in getting you money. So there's literally nothing to lose by giving them a call or reaching out to them. So go visit nationalerc.org. That's nationalerc.org, link in the description. All righty. So Debra is the CEO and owner of Whitson Law Firm. She's an experienced attorney. She's a mediator and a certified divorce specialist, CDS. She spent the first half of her career as a prosecutor and then later specialized in matrimonial and family law with a strong focus on mediation and collaborative divorce. Debra is recognized as an expert in working with domestic violence victims and is passionate about helping families make their own decisions, avoiding the adversities of legal battles. She is also the author of the aforementioned book, Divorce Like a Pro, A Better Way to Break Up, which again, you can get for free on her website or you can purchase on Amazon, which again, we'll have a link to that down below in the description. I'm sure there's a lot more I could say, and I'm sure I would miss a lot even if I tried. So I guess my first question, Debra, is what did I miss?
Well, wow, you did a good job talking about my professional background. So I guess what I would like to share is a little about my personal life. So I've been married 34 years to my wonderful husband. Together we have two adult sons, and I have two bonus adult stepchildren and two grandchildren at this point in time. And while my law firm serves the entire Northeast corridor of New York State, from the capital of Albany all the way up to the border with Quebec, Canada,
Wow.
my husband and I make our home in the beautiful Adirondack Park of upstate New York. So we live in the mountains. And that affords us a lot of really cool opportunities to do skiing, snowshoeing, hiking, canoeing, kayaking, and all things recreational. But we are very passionate tennis players. and also very avid world travelers. And so in our free time, when we're not working hard in our respective professions, we are usually off somewhere, either exploring our beautiful United States of America or other places in all corners of the world. I'm a amateur home chef, as is my husband and our two children in common. So we enjoy cooking and eating good food and experiencing culinary delights when we travel in places where there are different cuisines. Um, yeah, I'm passionate about all sorts of causes affecting women and children in particular. I'm active as a charter founding member of a Zonta club in the Adirondack Park. Zonta is the world's oldest and longest standing women professional service organization whose mission it is to improve the lives of women and girls around the globe. And our mission is to ensure that everywhere on the globe that women's rights are seen as human rights. And we're very active here in our local club in the Adirondacks. So that's a little bit more about me.
Well, that's a lot of good information. Congratulations on being married so long and having wonderful children and everything else. We're about to, my wife and I, this summer, we'll cross the 20-year mark ourselves. We've got 5 kids, and they can keep you
Nice.
busy, to be sure. I don't know if
Nice.
I'd call myself a semi-amateur chef or anything, but we both cook. We don't ever eat out, so we know our way around the kitchen. This is a
Okay.
random question, but you said you're a tennis aficionado. Um,
Yes.
do you have an opinion on pickleball? Because I find that some people who are big into tennis have very established opinions about pickleball, and I'm kind of curious how you feel about it or if you care.
I am going to alienate a lot of pickleball lovers. I don't love it. I play it, and I in the winter here in the Adirondacks, winter lasts 10 months of the year, some years. We do play platform tennis, which is not that different than pickleball in the type of racket, but is a different ball and a different rule and play system. But because we love to play tennis, when we travel, so many public tennis courts are taken over by the pickleballers, and they've laid down lines for pickleball court sizes and so on and so forth. Or we can't ever get a public court because the pickleballers are out in full force. So I really love the physicality of a full court tennis match. The fact that I, get all sweaty and burn a ton of calories. And even though you move a lot and it's fast paced in pickleball, for me, it's just a different kind of experience. So, yeah, I roll my eyes when I see the pickleballers taking over the tennis courts of the world. So, sorry for
I
all the people
figured
who love
my
pickleball.
experience is that professional tennis, well, not professional, but like, frequent tennis hobbyists, tennis enthusiasts often
Mhm.
are a little opinionated about pickleball. So I was just kind of curious how you felt about that. So
Yeah.
pickleballers out there, it's okay. We still love you.
Yeah.
That's totally fine. So, let me ask you this. Well, I obviously already know a little bit about you. I know what you do and et cetera. But if you and I were in a elevator and we had 30 seconds together and I had no clue who you were, what would you say? Can you give me your pitch in 30 seconds or so? Tell me who it is you specifically help, who you target, what you do, what you specialize in, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. So while we're a full service family law firm, we specialize in helping people find better ways to break up where they can stay in control of their outcomes, keep their children, if they have them, out of the warfare, and get divorced without having to sell a kidney to pay for it. So that's kind of our focus in a nutshell. You mentioned I had a career as a prosecutor before coming to start my own law practice, my own law business. Clearly, I was always in the courtroom, and that was litigation, litigation, litigation. That's the nature of prosecution and criminal law. And so I thought that that was a skill set that would be sensible to translate into family law. And what I really found very quickly is that parties, people, humans, and their children don't fare well in battles over custody or finances. And it felt very disempowering to have people, to help people access a court system where a stranger in a black robe was going to make decisions about their kids, their future, their finances. And so I became very disillusioned with that. And there's a need for it. There are certain couples for whom the path to settlement, either in the courthouse or out of the courthouse, is just as impossible. Takes two to come to the table and be reasonable and level-headed. But we strongly prefer to work with the people who are reasonable and level-headed and who want to stay in control of settling their outcomes and determining their own future. But when we have to go to court, we can be tough advocates, but we're always looking for strategies to settle anywhere along the way, up to and including the day of a trial. There's still opportunities to have people sort of come to their senses and say, no, I'm not going to let this court make a decision over something so important and dear to me. So we consider ourselves strategic settlers, problem-solving attorneys, not the kind of attorneys who are going to throw shit on the wall. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't have said that word on your
That's
podcast,
okay.
but
I don't censor my guests. I usually keep this I keep my side clean and I don't engage in politics on my end, but I allow my guests free reign to say and speak whatever they want within reason. Obviously, if you go off on an incredibly terrible tirade, we might have to cut it, but
I should try to refrain from
I'm
doing
not
that.
gonna I'm not gonna bleep you, so you're totally
No,
fine.
my pickleball trashing is the worst you're going to get out of me today.
Okay, well, I might have to bleep that. I'll bleep out unnecessary. You ever seen there's an internet phenomenon called unnecessary censorship, and they take like a kid's show and they bleep out words, so you're like your brain as an adult fills it in. You're like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And you're like, no, they're just it's a Disney cartoon, but like and they're like, let's go to the bleep bleep bleep, and we'll go with the bleep bleep bleep. And you're like, oh my gosh, it sounds terrible. So I'll unnecessarily bleep you, and then the pickleball people will really hate you, but that's okay. So let me ask you this little more general question here. What got you into law? Were you the girl that grew up watching Perry Mason and just knew that the law was your goal? Or were you following some other path and you kind of stumbled into it? And what got you into family law in particular? How did you make that jump from being a prosecutor to doing family law and matrimonial law?
That's a great question. So the main answer is at an early age, I really wanted to be an author and a writer. Um, and I had no interest in law.
Accomplished.
I guess I never really thought about law, but when I was 14 and I was just finished my freshman year of high school, I have five siblings. I'm the youngest, but the next sibling was in his senior year and just graduated from high school. And one of his very best friends was gruesomely and brutally murdered. We lived in a safe community, and this was really shocking. And the case was very, of course, high profile, but also very close to everyone who knew this young man that we had lost. And my brother was rocked by the loss of his friend in this manner, especially. So, following the case, there was a technicality that the defense was leaning on that could have gotten the defendant who made a really detailed confession of all the horrible things he did leading up to the final act that killed this young man, that he might have walked free, that the case might have been tossed. And I don't want to bore everybody on that, what that technical argument was, but I was horrified. So this was my first real look at law. I probably saw shows. I never made much connection with them, but watching this case play out in the criminal justice system, I thought the criminal justice system was broken, that someone so clearly guilty could get off. Now, I know as a lawyer now and a mature adult that there's protections in our system for anyone and everyone who's accused of a crime, and those protections are there for good reason. And in this case, the defendant didn't walk. In the end, he's still in custody. That this is almost 50 years later. He's still in custody. So, but I determined then that I wanted to go to law school and I wanted to be specifically a criminal prosecutor. And so that's what I did. That what you mentioned, I started my career in prosecution. And I loved it, but it was stressful. It didn't pay well. I had a lot of responsibility on my shoulders. And as I was growing my family, I decided it was just time to move into something that was more parent-friendly schedule because I worked all the time as a prosecutor. I was on a government salary, so there was like a limit to what I could earn. I had worked a lot with victims of domestic and sexual violence and became expert in that. So I moved into private practice and went right into family law. I spent a couple of years in a firm where I was mentored by a very senior attorney who was edging toward retirement and wanted someone to carry the reins forward from his practice. And in the end, started my own law firm and never looked back. been doing family law ever since. Um, and there were, like I said earlier, there are a lot of skill sets that I took from my prior prosecution experience and the knowledge of working with victims of trauma and violence, because I see a lot of that still in the family court and matrimonial court forum, but also the fact that anyone going through a breakup, whether they were married and they have children, with or without children, and they're going through a divorce, or they had cohabitated and had children in common and are going through a breakup and then a custody, um, sometimes battle over custody and child support. There's a trauma, there's a grieving that everybody experiences in the loss of a relationship that they thought was lasting. So a lot of the skill set that I learned working with victims of criminal violence are quite applicable, and I think very helpful in me for me in my practice in relating to the clients and understanding that they are going through something that is traumatic, that brings a lot of emotions to the surface, that brings up a lot of old wounds, sometimes from the relationship, but oftentimes also from their past relationships, their childhood. So there's a huge mental health component to working with people in family and matrimonial law, for sure.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Um, So I read from our sponsor, National ERC, a little bit ago, and I mentioned the pandemic. I'm going to go ahead and ask this question because I know you're in New York,
Mhm.
and I know that different states had very different approaches to the pandemic. So obviously, we just got through with the pandemic, God willing. We're
Mhm.
not going through another one anytime soon. But I know a lot of different people faced a lot of different shutdowns. I'm curious if the pandemic or the response to the pandemic affected your firm, either in the way that you conduct law, or did you guys see a spike in, divorce and mediation cases? I've talked to family attorneys on both sides of that argument. Some said it actually they saw less business during that time, and some said it was just crazy. So I'm curious what your experience was during the last couple of years, last 4 years that we lived through.
Right. So it was very disorienting to have the court systems basically come to a screeching halt. And I know that that's an unpopular thing for me to say because New York officially said their courts were open, but they weren't. Um, and it took New York a long time to get the whole virtual court system thing running, up and running smoothly. So in those immediate days where businesses were kind of shut down and people were told to shelter at home, and you couldn't, have certain number of people in the office. So we were all trying to figure all that out. Immediately, the people who were separated and sharing children between two households began to have um, anxiety, panic, and disagreements over moving kids from household to household and whether or not the parents saw eye to eye on adherence to public safety suggestions for masking and, you know, 6 foot distances and not being in crowded places and so on and so forth. So some parents were much more cavalier and relaxed about that, and others were much more hyper focused on that. And so I was getting all sorts of calls. Like we were crazy busy with people saying, what do we do about this? Do I have to send my kid to this other house? And someone is sick in the other house, but they want my child to go, for the parenting time. And there was no guidance from anybody. There were no family court judges or divorce court judges giving any guidance on how to navigate co-parenting amongst multiple households. And so my mediation skills got put to great use. And, I quickly pivoted to online mediation. And while I had offered mediation before, I never thought about doing it in a virtual format. So I actually created a separate company at that time, Mediated Online Solutions, for the purposes of offering virtual mediation services. And the beauty of that and how it sort of broadened my access to potential clients is that mediators have to have a certain minimum amount of training and experience to hold themselves out as a mediator in most every of the 50 states. Although the states might have a little bit of a different minimum threshold for when you can say you are a mediator. But there's no licensure like a law license. So personally, I'm only licensed to practice law in the state of New York. But when I opened the mediation company and offered mediation services, it opened up the world for me to do virtual mediation with anybody who wanted to do mediation because I have way above the minimum credentials for any jurisdiction who looks at regulating mediation. So that offered a whole new business opportunity for me. And I sort of hinted earlier, that my penchant is to have people go through mediation, collaborative divorce, or just, two lawyers and two parties sitting around a table or on a Zoom screen, figuring things out, helping the parties figure things out. So I was delighted that that business opportunity and the opportunity to push more people towards mediation, because that was their only real meaningful option for a period of time. Um, uh, it aligned with my values. So while, personally, there was a lot of adjusting to be done. Um, uh, couldn't have all of my staff in the physical building. So, like everyone, pivoting to getting fully virtual, and moving away from physical legal files to digital legal files. But yeah, it provided an opportunity that I very much embraced to go online with mediation or alternative dispute resolution modalities.
Very cool. Now, is that mediatedonlinesolutions.com? Is that the right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, found it. I'm going to jump over and share my screen again because I'm going to give you a plug here on that one as
Yeah,
well.
thank you. And my husband partners with me in that adventure. He's a mediator as well. And he's a licensed certified social worker, family therapist by training. So we offer,
That book looks
yeah, there's the book there too.
very cool. Well, here's a shout out for this as well. So if you need a mediator, and no matter where you are, New York or beyond, mediatedonlinesolutions.com might be a wonderful resource for you. We'll come back and keep talking about that here in a minute. That's very cool. That's really neat, and to see the way that you can kind of pivot and shift and go to a very virtual, sort of a way to do things. It's kind of neat. Did you notice a spike or in actual divorce cases? Do you think that really drove people apart, or was it really more just what was your experience there?
We saw a huge spike, and I think we're still seeing the fallout from it. People were very stressed. So I think initially, right, courts were constrained, and people were kind of hunkering down, figuring out what is life going to be like for the, immediate future. Um, and if they were already together, it might have seemed difficult to figure out how to separate at that time. And in our particular area, being in the mountains of New York, where it's a very rural population with low density, where my first law office location is located, we had a lot of city people who were coming up, taking all of the rental properties, and they're bringing their laptops and working remotely in an area with low population density. They felt safer than being in Manhattan, for instance, or Boston, right? You'd have less exposure to the COVID pandemic bug. So people may often, maybe even if they wanted to separate, there was no properties available to rent or to move to. So I think people stuck it out for a while, but it stressed a lot of families. And if you mentioned you had 5 kids, if your kids were schooled from home and you had 5 of them, and then you're trying to do your work from home, and maybe your spouse is also doing work from home, people were really, really stressed. And then there were the people who had jobs they had to go to still. Maybe they were in healthcare, or maybe they were working in the grocery stores and they were still asked to report to work, but their kids had no school. And so they had to figure out, what do I do about these kids? I can't leave them home.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it was very, very stressful. And so we're still seeing an uptick in new clients reaching out to us, and people saying, when you ask like what happened, I always ask like what worked well, especially if they have kids. I want to tap in with the clients to what did they like or love about that person, and what are their good qualities as a parent. Because you forget that when you're no longer in love with somebody, or maybe you're really angry, or maybe you feel like you've been abused or taken advantage of or something. But to try to bring them back to is like there were things that everybody has value as a human being, and sort of remind people that demonizing the other party when you have kids in common especially is not particularly helpful. So when I ask clients, and my staff ask clients, like, so what happened, why are you reaching out now, and what led to this? A lot of people identify struggles during the time of the most constrained shutdown regulations, um, as being the point of no return, I guess, so to speak. Um, yeah, it's unfortunate. It was, people are, I don't know if we're going to really understand the effect on human beings, especially I think about little people being born into that experiencing world as a tiny infant or toddler with everybody having masks on. Like, what does that do for a child's development and ability to connect with humans? Because we connect by facial
Facial.
expressions and
That's one of the things I saw, and we don't have to
Mhm.
go down the rabbit hole, but I
Yeah,
found
yeah.
as well because
Sorry.
they say that we are wired. One of the few things, philosophers have speculated, are we a blank slate when we're born? What do we know?
Yeah,
What do we not know?
yeah. Hmm.
Even little ones, they naturally see faces. It's probably one of the reasons I think as human beings in general, we are inclined to see patterns and even see faces like the man in the moon or in the
Hmm.
clouds or whatever it is, because we are just so hardwired to see faces. And I
Yeah.
heard at least one or two different stories of people who were doing IQ tests on infants, and
Mhm.
they saw 15% or 15-point intelligence drop amongst infants raised during the COVID time because
Mhm.
they were missing so
Yeah,
much of what's important
yeah.
for them for making that
Hmm.
connection with them. So
Yeah,
anyway, we ever know fully, I don't know. I hope that we
yeah,
don't ever have to go back to that again because I think it was a
yeah,
dark time for it was the weirdest time to be alive ever. It was really unprecedented in its just level of weirdness. But anyway, that's
yeah,
neither here nor there.
yeah.
Speaking of weirdness, I'm going to ask my question I gave you earlier a little out of order here, but I'm sure that in your practice of law, you've encountered some real absurdities, maybe as a prosecutor, or in your time as family attorney. What's one of the most absurd things that you've encountered in your practice of law?
Oh my God. I've been practicing law for 30 years, so it's gonna be hard to pick the highlights. Oh gosh, certainly as a prosecutor, I saw a lot of really uh wacky, wacky stuff. So one thing that stands out is when I first came out of law school and I started my first job as a baby prosecutor 30 years ago, um, I didn't realize because I had come from a more urban area to the Adirondacks, so I didn't realize that in parts of New York State there's such a low number of attorneys in certain towns that New York allows non-attorneys to serve as magistrate judges, presiding in town courts. And town courts have criminal jurisdiction over misdemeanors and violent, petty offenses and traffic infractions, and also preliminary felony jurisdiction. So one of the first calls I got from a New York State trooper introducing a new case to me. He said that he had arrested a bunch of adults um, in a certain township where there was a town justice presiding, but um, they were charged, a couple of them were charged with felonies. And he explained that some kids on the playground after school who were like 9 or 10 years of age had started to get into a shoving match that turned into a fight between kids. And the parents went to their cars and got various implements to use as weapons and started beating kids and each other with like shovels and snow and ice removal tools and stuff like that. And I was like, wait, what? The adults didn't break up the fight. They, got into it with, dangerous instruments. And so that was just one of those sort of eye-opening things about coming to, uh, a job that I had some experience working in the Bronx County District Attorney's Office in the narcotics division. So I had experience in law school of handling Superior Court drug transaction cases, drug sales, and gang-related drug violence. But I never thought that, parents of elementary school kids would be committing felonies on the playground. So yeah, there was that. Um, I don't know. In the matrimonial world, I've had cases where the parties had settled everything, their real estate, the division of their pension assets, and one couple was fighting over a porcelain elephant. That was the holdup to settling. It's just that the stuff that people um fixate on because of some underlying wound or controversy that maybe the lawyers don't even, aren't tuned into. But there's some absurdities for sure that we see
I'll be
quite often.
fixating on something that is beyond rational,
Yeah,
irrational.
totally not rational. And I'm not talking like this was some, you know, Asian expensive artifact or something. It was just some trinket that they were like, nope, we're not settling because I want the elephant. And the other party's like, nope, I'm not settling if I don't get the elephant. And I was like, where can I buy another one of these? Because I want to just get you guys settled and I'll buy it and gift it to my client. I had a party that also was holding up a settlement. They had settled everything about their kids and all that sort of stuff. They were fighting over the Game of Thrones boxed DVD set.
I mean, that's easily replaceable. Maybe maybe porcelain elephant is a very unique thing, a keepsake, and you can't find it anywhere else. But I mean, a box set of
Yeah.
DVD, that's a $50 fix, right?
Yeah, they were
That's
ready to walk out of court and say they weren't settled because they both wanted the Game of Thrones set. So, and in that one, I said to my client, just sign the documents and I will gift you a brand new Game of Thrones set as your happily divorced parting gift. Got it settled.
go. And now Deborah actually offers a free Game of Thrones box set with every no, that's funny. That's a good way, I guess, to solve. It's thinking outside of the box, which is good. So I'm sure you've had some ups and downs. You've been practicing law for 30 years. You've probably had some failures, and I'm a firm believer that no failure is really a failure as long as people don't die. As long as you learn from it, right? So can you
Mhm.
tell my listener, Deborah, about maybe sometime in your law career where you experienced what you consider to be a failure or a setback, but what you learned from it and how you carry that forward to make sure that you're giving the best possible care to your clients.
Okay. I don't know if this is exactly kind of on the vein of what you're talking about, but I was very passionate about prosecution, and it was probably the most fun that I had at any point. I had other careers and other jobs prior to law school, um, but my boss, the district attorney, was moving on and running for a different political office, and um, so I threw my hat in the ring and ran for district attorney in the rural Adirondacks, where I was a transplant from an urban area, and that failed miserably. I ran against two local people. And while I had, more experience, and I was in the office and had been chief assistant district attorney, deputy district attorney below the elected district attorney for many years. Uh, I don't know. Somehow I deluded myself that qualifications matter. It's not, it's what you know, but not who you know. But that was silliness and naivety. So I lost spectacularly in that political race, and I learned that um, I'm passionate about serving the clientele that I work with, but I'm a terrible, terrible politician, and I need to stay out of that arena. And I have done so ever since.
I think for some people, finding out you're not a good politician in the sense that you didn't thrive in that arena might build trust rather than
Yeah,
tear it down.
in retrospect, I think I would have hated it because I really loved, my boss had to be political and he ran for several terms successfully, and I was with him through several successful reelection campaigns. But I was happy just really doing the work that kept the office running, and so I think I would have, in retrospect, if had I won, I would have hated it. Probably wouldn't have run again.
Well, there you go. Prosper where you're planted. So the flip side of that coin, though, is I'm sure you've had some great wins, some things that you're really proud of, the feathers in your proverbial cap that when you're falling asleep at night, you're like, oh man, that worked out so well, right? Can you let my listeners know about a time or two in your practice of law that are just kind of the shining gems, and hopefully it's more wins than losses. Nobody bats 1,000, but hopefully you've had some a couple of home runs. You're like, man, that was great. I can't believe maybe you thought everything was going against you guys, but then the judge decided differently or whatever it was. So tell my listeners about one or two of your favorite wins.
Sure. So there's a number that I'm really proud of, but I'm thinking of one gentleman who had three very young children, and uh, he was facing a custody battle. Basically, his wife took the three children from their home state of Florida at the time to New York, ostensibly for a visit to her family who were here in my region. And then she filed for custody saying she was breaking up, basically told him by filing for custody that she was breaking up with her husband and wanting to keep the kids in New York. At the same time, when they had been in Florida, he was interviewing for a, uh, a position within his company where he had been working, and he was the breadwinner for the family. Um, and the promotion would have taken him to Texas. And he got the promotion. And so, right, so she takes the kids to New York. He had been in Florida with her and the children, and now he needed to move to Texas. And so he hired me to defend the custody petition that the wife had brought here in New York. And this was a long time ago, before it was common for dads to have shared custody. And certainly in this sort of conservative rural part of upstate New York, very uncommon for dads to win primary custody and be permitted to live many, many miles away from where the mom was living. And we had a full-on trial, lasted multiple days, and the court ultimately awarded my client full custody of the three children. And me and the client, I think, were um, floored, honestly. And I tried very hard. I grew to really like this client, and really felt sorry for him. Under the circumstances that he was fully intending that they were going to maintain their family, and he didn't see it. He was very blindsided by the wife saying, "I'm done with this marriage and I'm taking the kids from you." Um, and so it felt like a real win for the underdog. And he keeps in touch with me and tells me about how the kids are doing, sends me updated pictures, and always is expressing how valuable our working relationship was to him and his kids. So that kind of stuff feels really, really good. Um, I also had a couple of very poignant and moving outcomes in the criminal arena. I had a child who was repeatedly sexually assaulted by her mother's live-in boyfriend, and the live-in boyfriend had a history of prior sexual offenses involving adult women, but this was a 11 or 12-year-old little girl. And she was so traumatized that I didn't know that she could make it through trial on the witness stand. And I worked very hard with her to gain her trust and prepare her. And I was the first to get granted application by a criminal court in our area to have the child victim testify live on closed circuit television outside of the presence of the defendant, because she was so terrified of him. And she just the idea of seeing him caused her to freeze up and really get anxious. In fact, one day I had her in the district attorney's office working with her to prepare her. I think we were preparing for her grand jury testimony. And the defendant had an appearance in the building for something unrelated to the sex crime prosecution. And he was passed by a window in the district attorney's office in the custody of police officers to be taken to, it might have been a child support proceeding for another child he had with someone else. And she saw him and she completely went catatonic. And it was like, okay, we're done for today. And, let's call your therapist and your mom. And so I was really worried that she wouldn't make it through the criminal trial. And through a lot of support and preparation and the wisdom of a judge who allowed her to testify in another room next to the room where the jury and the defendant were, where she couldn't see anything that was going on in the courtroom. She was just being asked questions by me from another room and answering. She made it through it amazingly. I mean, she showed great poise and strength, and he was convicted. And because of his prior felony convictions that were violent crimes as well. New York has a 3 strikes you're out, especially if it's violent felony offenses. So he got a sentence of, well, there were multiple offenses that he was convicted for regarding her, multiple incidents. I think it was 75 to life for him. And he was in his mid to late 30s. So, obviously he's going to die in prison. It's still there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think that we need prison reform in a lot of ways, but I'm also a fan of laws like that because there are just certain people that probably don't belong in polite society. It just is a reality on the ground. It's unfortunate. What are some of the other unique challenges that you deal with when it comes to dealing with victims of domestic abuse or a sexual abuse, obviously? And how do you balance the emotional aspects of a family law case like that with the various legal requirements that you have?
I think that if you stop being human, you can't be a really effective professional when you're working with vulnerable and victimized people. So it's hard. I guess it's a good thing I live with a family therapist, is I get therapy for free, whether I want it or not. I get therapy every day. But yeah, it's hard. But it's so worthwhile to help people who maybe don't feel like they have a voice, or they have trouble being heard, to be the voice for them, to be a support, to show empathy and understanding. I have to say that the attorney, the matrimonial and family law attorney that I mentored under, um, was male, and there's nothing wrong with that. I have men attorneys and other male staff in my organization, so I have nothing against male attorneys. But he was a man. He was very gruff. If women cried in his office, he would say, "Stop that. That's not fair. We're here to talk business," that kind of thing. Um, and he was not a mean person, but he just didn't have that ability or tolerance to understand and sort of give people going through a loss, or maybe people were going through a loss and they had been traumatized by the person they're breaking up with, um, to understand that they're human, and we take the human as a whole when they're sitting across the table from us or across the desk from us as professionals. And so you can't just say to the client, compartmentalize that and deal with that in your therapist's office, because I don't need it here now. It's going to make things more challenging, or we're going to spend a good part of our time today helping you to tell your story, because you need to tell the story. And it goes part and parcel for me. It goes hand in hand. And while sometimes hearing those stories and sitting with people through their pain is draining, um, it's necessary, I think, to be effective in this kind of work.
Gotcha. Um, Sorry, I had two other questions I was going to ask, and I was trying to keep them both in mind. And when you chase two birds, you catch neither. I don't remember where they went. Anyway, it is what it is. Well, let me ask you this then. Let me go back to your book because you wrote a book, and you obviously wrote a book for a purpose. Who'd you write your book for? Divorce Like a Pro, A Better Way to Break Up. Is this a self-help book? Is this a do-it-yourself book? Is this a how to approach working on a divorce in the best possible way book? Who is your book written for? Who should pick up a copy for free at your website or on Amazon? Link in the description below.
So the book has an important cautionary tale in there, and I'll share it real quickly in a moment. But um, I found myself constantly in consultations with potential new clients, and then also with existing clients, um, uh, emphasizing that there are other ways to go through a breakup, whether it's a separation of unmarried people who are dividing things up or sharing children in common after that separation, or people who are married and are separating, all aspects of their joint marital life, um, that um, there's some tenets that I think that people should keep in mind, and avoid mistakes of the people who make terrible mistakes along the way, right? So I kept having this same sort of dialogue with all these potential clients and existing clients, reminding them. And then I thought, why, if I'm saying this so often, why don't I write it? And then I can just say, go reread the book or read this book and then come consult with our firm, because it tells you a lot about what your options are, what things to think about, what things to plan for, what things to avoid. So the cautionary tale in that book is that I represented a husband, and he and his wife have two beautiful young girls, and they had agreed that they needed to divorce. And while they were trying to figure things out, he was staying in the basement of the house, and she was staying in the master bedroom as always. And they stayed in the same house with the kids, and they had dinner every night as a family. And they went together to the kids' dance recitals and soccer games and stood on the sideline. And they were getting along well. And he hired my law firm, and she hired the law firm of somebody who has a reputation of being a pit bull attorney, right? Pit bull attorney. Um, and immediately she and her attorney file a scathing motion attacking this guy, saying what a terrible father he is and how she feels threatened and frightened by him and so on and so forth. And it just didn't resonate with how many months they had been coexisting in the same household and operating as a respectful family for the sake of the girls while they sorted through things. Now, they were of modest financial means, so they really couldn't afford a legal war. That's another part of the cautionary tale is don't spend more money on a fight when you stand to get less than you're spending in return. That makes no sense, right? If I said, hey, I'm a financial planner, and if you invest $100,000 with me, I can make sure you're going to get 90 back. Why would you do that, right? I mean, I'm the worst financial planner in the world if I say I'm going to lose money for you. So you don't spend more on a fight than you are likely to reasonably attain. And sometimes it's hard to monetize when you're talking about hurting your children in the process, right? There's no price tag you can put on that. But just a family who has a combined income of 80,000 or 90,000 or 100,000 shouldn't spend 80,000 on their divorce. That's most of their annual income. It makes no sense. But that's what these people ended up doing. And not because my client wanted to do that, but because he was drawn into it. And so when he first came into me, I said, let's talk about, outcomes. Let's get a sense of what you owe, what you own and who you owe money to, and, how to work out the parenting plan and all that. And so we crafted a proposal at our very first, working session after he hired the firm. And we sent that proposal to the other side, and it arrived on the other side's desk about the time they were getting ready to file this awful motion that uh, they went ahead and filed anyway, and they didn't respond at all to the settlement proposal. And 2 years, and I know my client's bill was 40,000. 2 years and $40,000 later, when he was signing the final marital settlement agreement, he said, "This really sounds almost exactly like what we offered on day one." And I said, "It is. I mean, with a few minor changes, it is. It is what we offered on day one." And he's like, "Holy crap, I just spent 40,000 and you saw the outcome at the beginning." And, you know, and we got dragged into this stuff. So, that's what this book is about, is think about your options along the way. Can you sit at the table and figure most of this out and have a lawyer just memorialize it in a binding contract? Or do you need more support of mediation? Or do you need even more support of a collaborative divorce formal model where you both hire non-litigious attorneys and work it out together, and you bring in a parenting coach or a financial planner if that's applicable to your situation? Or are you going to go the court route? And, once you've launched the grenade across enemy lines, you can't undetonate that grenade. It's there. And when I see this client from time to time now, I say, "How are the girls? How is life? Have things gotten any easier with you and your ex and co-parenting?" And he's like, "No, we can't communicate. We can't get along. There just was too much damage done to their relationship." Um, yeah, you can't, you know, reverse burning down the house, so to speak.
Yeah,
And that's
it
what the
doesn't.
book is about, is, going to court and burning down the house should be nobody's choice. My client got drawn into that direction. Um, but it shouldn't be your first stop. And for a lot of people, it's hire the pit bull attorney and file a nasty divorce complaint out of the gate. And once you set that tone, it's hard to, back it up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, yeah, no, that's you can't put the genie back in the bottle. There have been a lot of legal changes that have happened over the last, 20 some odd years. And, everything from, well, and just changes in general, from the rise of social media and online world to
Mhm.
change like Obergefell, and those decisions that
Mhm.
have affected the legal landscape. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen in your practice of law, and where do you think the next 10 or 20 years are going to go?
So when I started practicing in matrimonial and family law, New York was still a fault-based divorce state. So we didn't have no fault divorce or irretrievable breakdown or irreconcilable differences. So we still saw a lot of cases starting with allegations of adultery, which of course are very inflammatory and embarrassing, et cetera. The next most common, or maybe slightly more common, was cruel and inhumane treatment as a ground for divorce. So you had sometimes the affair got thrown into cruel and inhumane treatment. Sometimes it was, just really nasty allegations because you had to prove enough to entitle the court to determine that the ground was satisfied in order to grant the divorce. And so when I talked a moment ago, literally just the last moment, that once you throw those allegations out there, it's hard then to play nice and come back together and say, we can work together as co-parents. So that was awful. Those years were awful. New York was the last of the 50 states to pass, we call it irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. And so that changed my job satisfaction tremendously. And I'm sure it made it a lot more palatable for many people to go into the divorce process without the necessity of, because I used to have to say, tell me the worst things you can tell me about your spouse, because we're going to have to put it in a document that's getting filed in court, in order for you to be awarded a divorce. Um, so grateful for that. That's been, game changing for me as a professional, and it's obviously been game changing for the parties who are going through it, and it allows them to have the hope of keeping a workable civil relationship throughout the process and beyond.
Any big changes you see coming down the pipeline, or
New York is, making some interesting changes. So there's a bill, I think it's on the governor's desk, and I haven't checked to see if she's signed, but adultery is still a crime on the books in the Penal Code of New York. And so I don't know, maybe it's unpopular to be a legislator or senator or House of Representatives person to say, I'm going to sponsor a bill that we decriminalize adultery. But I mean, that's also very ancient and archaic, right? Um, so that's something new and different, and bringing New York, I think, more into alignment with modern realities. Um, the New York now has, as part of our division of the marital estate, marital property, a provision about domestic pets. So pets used to be chattel, and the judge would just toss a coin or something. I don't know, like who gets the dog or the cat or the horse. And now we have something sort of like custody. You know, how what what's in the best interest of the domesticated animal, to go to wife or husband or spouse one or spouse two. And they look at things like who spent more time with the pet, who's been responsible for the care and upkeep and the veterinary appointments, who socializes with the pet more or whatever. So I suppose there's going to be cases where it's a tie.
you're going to get split custody, like the dog spends a week here and a week there?
The court cannot, because we haven't gone that far, because it's still property, right? It's not a human life, so it's property. So it's an award to one or the other. But also the nice thing about settling out of court is you can include a pet custody arrangement in your marital agreement. And we do help clients negotiate those out of court. Uh, Successfully. That's a very common thing. I know I'm a pet lover. I have dogs and cats, so I would definitely not want to be entirely without any of my pets.
Oh, there
So
you
that's
go.
a nice trend. I think New York is one of the few states who acknowledges that domestic animals or pets, family pets, are more than just, dividing up the silverware.
I think that's fair. I
But
have
of course,
found out. I made my wife two promises. One of them was we wouldn't live in Kansas forever, and we spent 2 years in Virginia, so I technically kept that promise, and then we came back, and now we're still in Kansas. The other promise was we'd eventually get a dog. So after we got a house, the next year, I was like, all right, we'll get you a dog this year. So we finally got our dog, and I was like, maybe I'll become a dog person. I am
Mhm.
not a dog person. I take him on all the walks. I get utility from him, and I appreciate he's very gentle. He'll play tug of war with me hard, but he plays with my little 5-year old so gently. So I appreciate him. But man, if push came to shove, I'd get rid of him. I'm not a dog person. I'm sorry,
I don't know
folks.
if you and I can be friends then. Sorry.
Yeah, well, people like pickleballs. I grew up with cats, so I think I just appreciate the way cats are. They're softer than dogs, and they make our cat growing up made less of a mess. But I've also heard horror stories what cats can do with let go in a house. You get the wrong
Mhm.
cat, it's just as bad as a dog. And this dog, I got to be honest, he's clean, so I appreciate him. Just not a dog person, I guess. I don't know. It is what it is. We have fish too, so. Well,
You're
Deborah,
gonna
I appreciate the time you give me today. I don't want to monopolize your entire Friday afternoon here. So here in a minute, I'm going to ask you our two final questions.
okay.
Question one is, if we can go back in time, meet young Deborah, what advice would you give yourself and why? Other than the obvious, buy a lot of Bitcoin, hold till 60K. And then question number two is, if I gave you my magic pen, with this magic pen, you could add a law to the books, strike a law from the books, or adjust a law that's on the books. What law would you add, edit, delete, change, whatever it happens to be, and why? While you percolate on those concepts, we're going to jump back over and take a look one more time. This is your website. That is Whitson Law Firm. I'm talking with Debra Whitson, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears her name. That is Whitson Law Firm. I think I'm showing the right screen here. I'm going to unshare this. It's looking wrong on my end, but I think I clicked the right one. Do it again. There we go. That is whitsonlawfirm.com. Link in the description below. She also runs mediatedonlinesolutions.com. So we'll make sure to put a link to that as well. And she wrote a book, which you can get for free on either of those websites or at Amazon by clicking the link below. Divorce Like a Pro by Debra Whitson, A Better Way to Break Up. Our final sponsor for the show today is Rank with News. Is not being in the news regularly costing your law firm or your company credibility and visibility? Do you feel that getting found in Google search is more about dumb luck than science? If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, Business Insider, and others, and to see those articles ranking locally, even nationally sometimes, in under 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people were actually looking for that helped build you up as an expert in the field, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page one of Google safely and legally in under about 2 weeks, organically and permanently, ranking quickly and sticking sometimes indefinitely. This is functionally guaranteed SEO or search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business or firm, visit rankwith.news or rankwithnews.com to learn more and book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your law firm or your business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can launch you to page one in a matter of minutes and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers and more clients with rankwithnews.com. There we go. All right. So, question number one, if we can go back in time, meet a young Deborah, and you're able to give yourself, maybe just one piece of advice, what advice would you give yourself and why? And maybe by extension, someone who's, fresh, green behind the gills, but fresh out of law school.
So, the one thing that I regret most from my youth is being so determined to get my professional career launched and to be a self-sufficient working adult that I didn't avail myself of opportunities that I've been able to provide to my own children, and I'm so jealous. So things like study abroad. I didn't make that a priority. I didn't make taking a gap year and backpacking across Europe a priority. And so maybe now my love for traveling and getting away and having new and sometimes unusual experiences is my way of sort of nurturing my younger self's regrets. So I was recently in Portugal with my husband, taking a continuing legal education course in Portugal. And I saw a cruise ship docked in the water, and it said University at Sea. And I was like, why didn't I do university at sea when I was 20? Like, can I go now? I'm almost 60. Will they take me at university at sea? Because that's what I want to do. So, yeah, that's my younger self was too driven to, be a responsible adult human being and functioning
Shout
member
out,
of society.
shout out to our new sponsor, University at Sea. Visit them online. I'm just
I
kidding.
know, I know.
That's a neat concept. And you
Right?
mentioned continuing education in Portugal. Maybe you should start teaching classes and you should teach them abroad so that people follow you. And I've seen people do this. They'll book a cruise and you teach a class and everyone pays a certain amount and then, you get a percentage of it and the cruise line gets it. So basically you get to get paid to go on a cruise. And there you go. I want 5% of all of the business that you generate.
You're now my life coach, Justin. Thank you. That's a great idea. That's going to be my next side business.
Also, turnlife.com. We'll have them as a sponsor next week, so we're good. So
I could have like sort of how to do the smart divorce boot camp on a cruise ship. How
there
about
you
that?
go. There you go. And you could also have that was one of the questions I was going to ask too. Have the couples come together, right? And maybe they resolve their issues and wind up not getting divorced. Have you ever had a couple come to you and in the middle of it reconcile and stay together? And if that's happened, did it last?
Um, First, the answer to the first question is yes, many times. And actually, mediation clients find that when I help them develop better communication skills, and then they realize that they are, they work together better than they imagined. Um, I've had them get back together. I've had mediation clients who got divorced and then remarried each other because they learned a better way to communicate. So part of what I work on with my clients is better communication skills, how to reduce conflictual communications in your relationship as co-parents or separated parties. So yeah, and then I have clients who are going through sort of the more traditional divorce path, both high of attorney and maybe they're not sure if they're going to go to court or settle or not. And then they disappear and we lose touch with them. We're like, hey, we need your net worth statement to be finalized. You have to come in and work with us on that. And then ignoring. And then we're like, are we getting back together? And that's great because look, I've been together 34 years with my husband. So I am not pro breakup relationships. Some marriages don't work and some people need to move on. But you know, there when people can work it out and make it work, that's a good thing. That's a very good
Absolutely.
thing. So yeah.
Well, there you go. Well, my second question is this. I have a magic pen here. Now, this pen happened to come from St. Benedict's Abbey, which is a Benedictine abbey in the middle of Kansas. I'll give them a free shout out. That is kansasmonks.org. But one of the priests must have blessed this pen because I found it has magical properties or maybe miraculous properties. It can strike laws from the books. It can edit laws on the books or add new laws. If I let you borrow this pen, and you can make one change. And this can be a little tiny change of a law that forces you to fill out, forms in triplicate 8 times a week. Or it could be a major change with sweeping national ramifications, maybe even international ramifications. What law, Deborah, would you change and why?
I would change the law in New York that ties child support um, payment obligations to the amount of parenting time. And let me be more specific. In New York, um, if you don't have 50.00001% of the time with the children, you are the payor, right? You have to have, and so there's a fight on hours and days for people who say, I don't want to have to pay support to the other parent. So, and it might not even eliminate your support if you have a true 50-50 arrangement, but in certain situations and with kids of certain ages, the the fight to measure minutes and hours to the 50-50 mark is not healthy for the kids. And I think that New York should have a more flexible arrangement where parents can work out appropriate parenting arrangements on whatever percentage of time sharing that they want to. And it might be different at different stages of a child's life. Um, I've never met a teenager who really loved having their parenting time measured 50-50 to the minute. They want some flexibility. They maybe want to stay an extra day at dad's, or they maybe want to spend an extra week at mom's, and it works itself out over time, or they want to be where they want to be, right? Especially if the parents are in two different communities, the teenagers might be migrate to where their friends are, where they can go outside and meet up with friends more easily. So some of these things like gripping on to this 50-50 time for financial reasons, for child support reasons, causes a lot of contention between the parents, and it puts kids in a very untenable situation because the kids invariably become hyper aware that at least one of the parents is like, I have to have you 50% of the time. And kids love their each parent 100%, right? And they're not measuring the quality of their relationship with mom or with dad, or if they have two moms or two dads with both parents, by the number of minutes or hours they're spending with each parent. And I've never had a situation where there's a hyperfixation by one parent on this 50-50 mark where the child isn't acutely aware of it and negatively impacted by that. So as a family law practitioner, I see a lot of legal battles over this issue, and I see a lot of kids who are not well served by the way our statutes in New York make the focus on a 50-50 parenting schedule.
That's really interesting. Some people give me like a one sentence answer and that whatnot, but that was actually a very good and in-depth answer. So thank you for that. Well, Deborah, thank you again for taking the time to talk with me and my listeners today. I always do like to let my guests have the final word. Is there any parting thoughts or words of wisdom you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
No, I just hope I gave people some ideas on thoughtful ways to approach how they enter into a separation or divorce. There are better ways to do this than the courtroom battle.
I think that's great advice. Well, this has been The Attorney Post. I am, as always, your host, Justin West. If you're listening to this on YouTube, we always do appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're on any of the podcast repositories, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever it is, iTunes, please feel free to rate us there or leave a comment as well. Also, if you know someone who would benefit from this, feel free to share this with them. This has been The Attorney Post. I've been chatting with Debra Whitson, who runs Whitson Law, which is the eponymous law firm that bears her name, which is a little bit redundant to say it that way, but that's okay. As always, though we do talk about a lot of legal issues in this podcast does not constitute legal advice. And if you have a legal issue that needs help, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter you need help with. Obviously, if you are in New York State and you are looking at a family law issue, whether it's divorce or custody or whatnot, I think Deborah would be a wonderful resource for you. And you can visit her online again at whitsonlawfirm.com. Also, if you need mediation, she has her mediation practice as well, which was mediatedonlinesolutions.com. We'll have links to both of those as well as her phone number in the show notes below. But again, if you know anyone who could benefit from this, please feel free to share this with them so that they have the knowledge they need moving forward. Because as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Until next time, thank you guys for listening and have a good one. Bye-bye.